Why are some countries progressive when it comes to LGBT rights, while others, not so much? Joining us now to discuss that and more, Graham Reed. He is director of the LGBT rights program at Human Rights Watch in New York City. Fred Litwin, he's a blogger at Gay and Right. Sarah Ombija, she's fundraising assistant at a group called Black Cap, the Black Coalition for AIDS Prevention. Maurice Tomlinson, Toronto-based lawyer and facilitator for LGBTI Aware Caribbean. And Andrea Houston, journalist and co-founder of #EndHateLaws. Good to have everybody around our table here at our makeshift studio in Leaside. We want to remind everybody watching that you can be part of the program. Our producers are hosting a live chat right now on our website, theagenda.tvo.org. You can also chime in using the hashtag AgendaTVO on Twitter. You are all here because we're running this two-part documentary series that Stephen Fry did that you've all seen, and it's just terrific. It's a real eye-opener. And for those who are watching now who may have missed it, second part is next week. They can catch that. Here's a little snippet from last night's program, and then we'll come back and chat. Roll tape, please.
Yes, I always cry at weddings anyway, and you just realize how far we've traveled, and it's incredibly touching. It makes one very proud to live in a time when this is finally possible. It seems to be that the world is going in two directions at once. The enemies of enlightened thinking, open thinking, free action, free thought are many. And gay people, you know, we should certainly celebrate days like today, but we should be aware, we should be cautious, we should always be on our guard, you know, that somebody out there hates us.
Celebrating, Andrea, but always on our guard. What's your reaction to seeing that clip?
I think it's really wonderful what Stephen Fry did. And I think it's particularly wonderful that he did it as a British man, because so many of these laws are relics of colonialism. They're relics of British colonialism. And they are now, in some cases, such as Uganda, Nigeria, and many of these countries, are strengthening laws that already exist, some of which have been benign. People haven't been prosecuted on them. So I think it's really important that he is raising this issue, and he has taken this issue on. And he's also really highlighting a main point, is that this is all part of a global shift. Much of that global shift in essentially taking away the rights of LGBTI people is part of largely American fundamentalism that has been going to these countries and spreading a message that has failed.
I suspect our viewers know LGBT stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgendered.
And the I.
The I is new. I got to confess, Maurice, your group has got the I on the end. What's that for?
That stands for intersex. These are persons who are born with indeterminate sexual organs, and it's a group that very rarely gets mentioned in the LGBTI spectrum. But we're trying to ensure that people remember that these are persons who are very important to the discussion and have to be brought in.
Okay. Thus the I.
That's the I.
While you have the floor, your view on the clip.
You know, as Andrea said, I think it's very important that a Briton highlight what is happening around the world with regards to these laws, because the fact is, in Jamaica, where I come from, this relic, this 1864 law, is what is still being used to persecute LGBTI people, where, although the law is not being used to prosecute, it is certainly used as a form of persecution in terms of police extortion. You know, the politicians using it to beat gay people over their heads, and the church is using it to beat gay people over their heads. So it is important that Britain acknowledge its role in leaving this legacy and also doing its best to try and remove them.
Graham, your view.
You know, Stephen Fry makes the point that we've made enormous progress, and he's right. Who would have thought that since the first marriage legislation was introduced 14 years ago that we'd have 17 countries in the world today that recognize marriage equality? On the other end of the spectrum, there are some 80 countries in the world that retain the laws that have been mentioned, and the penalties are severe. At the most extreme, 5 countries retain the death penalty for consensual adult same-sex conduct.
What are those 5 countries? Do you know?
Saudi Arabia, Iran, Yemen, Mauritania, and...
There's one more.
There's one more.
It'll come to you.
It'll come to me. So those are 2 bookends. On the one hand, marriage equality, on the other hand, the death penalty. And between those is people are striving for an end to violence. Surely we can all agree that there shouldn't be violence. For non-discrimination, You should not be able to be fired from your job for being lesbian or gay. You should have equal access to health care, to housing, to education, and for decriminalization. These laws should go. The state has no place in the bedrooms of consenting adults.
Who said that? I'm trying to remember. Who said that? Yes, that's a pretty famous quote. Sarah, your view.
He's doing a very good job, but there's still homophobia. Like, as a newcomer, you go through that back home, you come back here, and it's still the same. Back
home for you is where?
Back home is in Kenya.
And you're now here, and you find it just, did I hear you say you find it just as bad here as you do back home?
No, not just as bad, but it still does exist.
Yeah. What do you run into here that makes you say it exists and I see it?
As a newcomer, it's even harder because you come from a society where you're not accepted. Being gay is unacceptable. So you live in the closet, you live in a secret life. Then you come here and you go through being a refugee, you're not accepted, you're not able to access healthcare or housing because you're a refugee, and you're a refugee as a gay person.
But when you come to Toronto, listen, this is your life, not mine, so I'm just asking questions here, but do you feel as persecuted in living in Toronto as you would back in Kenya?
No.
Okay.
No. On a scale of 1 to 10, Toronto is better. It's much, much better. It's a 9.
Toronto's a 9 in terms of its openness and acceptance. Okay. I think Torontonians would be happy to hear that. Fred, weigh in on this if you would.
Well, I think it was a very, very good clip, but I think it really shows the sort of the fact that I think we should do a little less celebrating. You know, we do a lot of celebrating in the West. We have these gay pride marches with people marching, nudity, assless chaps, some really obscene stuff. And you've got people being executed in Iran and other countries. So a lot of work to do. Our brothers and sisters internationally need our help. This is not a time for us to celebrate. It's a time for us to get down to work and help our brothers and sisters with their enormous struggles for freedom and liberty.
An innocent question, but what's wrong with doing both?
There's nothing wrong with doing both, but we don't do both.
Well, I'm saying celebrating how far you've come, while at the same time being vigilant for what else is going on.
Yeah, well, I think we could temper the celebration somewhat with a lot more work for our brothers and sisters. I mean, I think that the gay community has been, unfortunately, the oxygen has been taken out of the gay community by Israel. This inordinate focus on Israel while gays are being executed in Iran. I'd like to see the Gay Pride March raise money for Iranian groups and raise awareness of what's happening in these sort of countries.
Andrea.
Rather than delve into Israel and Gaza, because we could be talking about pink washing right now as well. But
talking about what?
Pink washing, which is what Israel has used gay rights in Israel to hide the fact of human rights abuses in the occupied territories. But you're right in some respect. When we talk about celebration, and you're right as well, Steve, we can do both. We can celebrate the gains that we've made while still fighting for our brothers and sisters in other countries. Especially when we talk about Canada, Canada is not the perfect utopia for queer rights. We have a lot to do here. Specifically, we don't have trans rights yet at a federal level. Bill C-279 needs to pass. It's been stalled in the Senate for quite some time. We watch the hearings right now surrounding sex work, and we're actually looking at going back and recriminalizing women who just want the autonomy to sell sexual services and not have the government get into their bedrooms in their homes.
No,
I know, but
completely different topic. Has nothing to do with gay liberation at all.
Sex work is queer, part of queer rights.
No, it isn't. Not at all. Not in the slightest.
Absolutely,
it is. Nothing to do with it.
We as queer people stand in solidarity with sex work.
I hear you, and the issue you brought up about trans rights, that's next week's program. We are going to focus on that specifically next week. But maybe we'll see you again. I don't know. But keeping the focus more clearly on what we talked about here.
I was just providing examples as to, it's not perfect here in Canada.
Okay, no. Okay, but Maurice, we do have same-sex marriage in Canada. It's one of a small number of countries around the world that permits same-sex marriage. How do you think the landscape changed as a result of that?
In global terms?
In Canada.
In Canada, I think that the focus shifted to celebrating marriage equality and shifted away from the issues of bullying, shifted away from sensitization that has to happen in schools, in police services, in workplaces about what it means to be LGBTI. And I'll give you an example. When I came to Canada, I married a Canadian, and I thought, well, you know, things are perfect here, as was sold to me. There are no issues remaining.
When did you get married?
I got married in 2012.
Okay.
And I thought that there wouldn't have been issues of persons objecting to my walking down the street with my husband holding hands. And I have been harassed in Toronto because I dared to walk close to Church Street holding hands with my husband.
Just for those who don't know, Church Street really is the epicenter of the gay village in Toronto.
Exactly.
And you got dirty looks from people?
Not only dirty looks, you know, a moving van stopped in the middle of the road, and the driver shouted obscenities at us as we were holding hands and walking down the street near Church Street in Toronto. And I was shocked because I personally had not expected that here. And so for me, I realized that although we have celebrated marriage equality, we have not done enough work in terms of sensitizing the community, whether it be through addressing homophobia in immigrant populations, in you know, particular pockets. We haven't done that because we think we have marriage, it's done.
Graham, because in Canada there is same-sex marriage that is legal, and in some American states as well.
19, yeah.
19 out of 50? Okay. Has that only changed things for the better for people in the LGBT do I add a Q on the end as well?
Sure.
Q communities?
Look, there's been enormous progress, and marriage does represent an achievement of equality. There is sometimes a reaction against marriage equality. We see in the name of the law in Nigeria is the same-sex marriage prohibition bill. A lot of the arguments that are used against basic equal rights for LGBT people is a pushback against marriage equality. So we see a reaction against the achievements and the gains that are made in some parts of the world in other parts of the world. And just for the record, I should add Sudan, northern Nigeria, and parts of Somalia as countries that still retain the death penalty for same-sex practices.
So it's more than 5 then?
Well, 5 and 2 parts of Somalia and Nigeria, not the whole country, just sections of
Understood.
the country.
Do you, Fred, think that, to what extent does legal discrimination against LGBTIQ people in Canada still exist?
Well, it's there. I mean, look, the
legal discrimination, I'm saying.
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by legal discrimination.
Housing, employment.
Look, there's going to be some of it because there's going to be some people who lag behind their own personal, their personal views on tolerance of gay people. There's always going to be some people, and that's really, really unfortunate. So there's some of that, but it's going away. It's going away massively. I mean, amazing changes since I was growing up and coming out of the closet back in the 70s and 80s. So we made amazing changes to Canada. It's lovely.
How difficult do you think it is for people in this country?
It's difficult when you talk about issues surrounding intersectionality. If you're a white, upper middle class gay man, you're probably going to have an okay time in Canada. If you're a person of color, if you're trans, if you're a sex worker, if you're HIV positive, if you're born into poverty, all of these different elements, as they intersect on top of one another, make it extremely difficult to find employment, to find a home in some cases, and you experience discrimination and marginalization in everyday life. And so we have to always think about how different people experience that discrimination, even in a wonderful place like Toronto.
Let me ask Sarah about that. You told us earlier in the program about how you, as a woman of color from an African country, are having occasionally a tough time of it here. Do you notice, though, as Andrea puts it, upper middle class white males who don't have so tough a time here?
Yes.
You do see that?
Yes, I do see that.
How do you see that? How does it manifest itself?
Because you're born here and because you're in the upper class, you're much better off, you're the untouched. But for the person like me, the newcomer, the refugee, It's very difficult. It's very difficult. You're not able to access so much. You're not able to, you don't have a say. You're just here because you're protected by Canada, but that's it. But I know people who are even taken back home, they're deported back home because they're not able to prove that they're homosexuals or they're gays.
That would be a challenging thing to prove. How do they expect you to prove that?
Yes,
kind of
you're
thing?
expected to prove that you're gay.
Yeah.
You come here as a newcomer, you go through your refugee process, and you're expected to bring in documents that prove that you're gay.
How documents? Like what possibly could you present that would prove that you're gay?
Say, pictures that suggest, or letters from relatives, from maybe the police, from whoever.
I see. Maurice, does this ring true for you?
Well, thankfully, I didn't have to go through that process. I chose to come to Canada. I had to flee Jamaica temporarily when my marriage to my husband became known in the country. But I determined to continue going back to Jamaica, and I continued to go back to Jamaica to do my work there as a lawyer, challenging the anti-sodomy laws. But I never had to go through the refugee process. But from what I've heard, I've had to do some testimonies on behalf of people who are seeking refugee status. It is a very harrowing experience to prove your orientation. You know, you have to prove intimate details, and depending on the judge you get, it can get very graphic. You know. Not everybody can meet the standard. So thankfully, I didn't have to do it, but I really feel the pain of those who have to do it.
I've actually done stories, news stories about newcomers who are actually asked to produce porn, gay porn, to prove that they're gay. And these are people, obviously, as Sarah says, these are people who spend their entire lives hiding the fact they're gay. They're not going to travel with gay porn. It's ridiculous, and it's dehumanizing, frankly.
When you're in Jamaica, and you talk to people down there, what do they think of what's happening in Canada vis-a-vis LGBTIQ rights?
You know, Jamaica is a wonderful country. We have a very diverse set of people. There are some who celebrate the advances and wish Jamaica would catch up. But sadly, the vast majority, the last time we did a survey at the university, over 80% of the country self-identified as homophobic. And so the advances
80% say we're homophobic?
Yes, they self-identify as homophobic.
To a public opinion survey, for example?
Yes, it was a survey which was a very rigorous survey done by the most prominent university in the region, University of the West Indies. And we did it year on year, and it's the same result, you know, and it's across all spectra. It's, you know, doesn't matter socioeconomic status, doesn't matter education levels, right across. Because we have a very fundamentalist religious environment which still believes that being gay is an abomination.
Fred, I gotta ask you this follow-up, because one of the things that did astonish me about the Stephen Fry documentary was how many so-called homophobic people are prepared to go on television and kind of tell everybody how much they hate gay people. Why does somebody do that?
Well, because to them, they see that as perfectly normal. I mean, that's their worldview is correct as they see it, and so they're proud. I would say they're proud of what they believe in. So there's no shame. It's like, hey, I want to tell the world I believe this. It's right. So bring on the cameras. I'm okay with it.
You wanted to make another point.
I have to say I disagree on this. I think white males face a really big problem in Canada right now. The university.
White gay males?
Well, white males in general. I mean, because 60 to 65% of the college population are female. You've got hiring practices in the federal government and large corporations that favor people of color, women, Aboriginals, people with disability. It's hard for white males. There's some problems there.
Okay, no, Andrea, we're going to be respectful of everybody's views around the table.
This is the problem, is that people don't take this issue seriously.
I suspect, she can speak for herself, but I suspect the laugh came from the notion that people with disabilities, people with color, don't see themselves as having that great a deal in the country compared to white men.
But I didn't say that. I mean, what I'm saying here is that the facts are clear right now in university. We're heading for a disaster. We've got 60 to 65% of university population is female. The men aren't going to university. this is going to be a disaster in the future. It's a whole other show, but this is a big, very, very big issue.
I should be taking notes on this because so far we've got 3 ideas for 3 other programs that, yeah, we're going to do more. Let me get back to same-sex marriage. We have it in Canada. We've had it for more than a decade in Canada. What distinguishes, Graham, our same-sex marriage law here from, say, other countries in the world that also recognize it? Anything?
Well, I mean, the details of same-sex marriage vary from country to country, right? But I think that at the essence is about a legal recognition of relationships, is that is what people are striving for, is that it's emerged from a recognition, particularly around the HIV and AIDS era, where it became patently obvious that people weren't entitled to inheritance, they didn't have visitation rights. So the real issue is about some form of legal recognition of relationships and the rights that come with that. That's the essence of it. So around the world there are different forms of that, but essentially that's what the aspiration is.
And if you had to make a hierarchy of countries who are, say, the most progressive in recognizing these rights you just enumerated, where's Canada on that list?
I would like to defer to the Canadians on the panel.
Well, but you
know
you might know the international situation better than they would. I mean, they might know Canada better than you, but
Canada is pretty high up on that list.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay, well, to that end then, Andrea, let me start this with you. If we were having this discussion, say, 50 years ago, we might say that the mark of a progressive society is you offer unemployment insurance to people who lose their jobs, or you offer welfare to people who are down on their luck. Labor rights, that kind of thing. If we were having this conversation 25 years ago, you might say, if you've abolished capital punishment, you're among the more enlightened nations of the world. Today, is it the litmus test of a so-called progressive and/or enlightened nation how well you do on gay rights?
There's actually a word for this question. It's called homonationalism, and it's looking at same-sex marriage particularly as a barometer or a litmus test for how progressive a country is. I think many academics say that this is the wrong way to look at this because of all the many nuances within this. You know, you may have same-sex marriage, but gay people are still beaten in the streets and can't get jobs and experience, you know, systemic racism and things like that. So I think it's actually the wrong question. I think the better question is to ask, how are people treated? How safe are they on the ground? And can, you know, maybe not even necessarily going as far as walking down the street holding hands, but are you going to be, you know, be smoked out of your house and be forced to live in sewers, as we see in the case of Jamaica? Are you going to lose your job because you're gay? Are you at risk of being killed when you leave a nightclub? These kinds of things are the better litmus test.
Let me ask our director, Sheldon, can you go to a wide shot here so we can see all the guests all at once? Thank you. Show of hands, how many people here have run into what you might call a scary situation because you were walking somewhere and a large group of people noticed you and made you fearful for your safety?
As
hands up.
A queer person?
Yes, hands up.
Yeah. Does one person with a knife count?
One person with a knife would count. You've had that situation. Fred, you didn't put your hand up.
No.
No incidents.
No, not really, no. The notion of tolerance in society used to be how societies treated Jews. To me now, it's how you treat gay Jews. That's the real test of a society.
And you are both, so it's double trouble for you.
How they treat me, that's how I judge a society.
I see.
You know, sometimes I think it can be a litmus test. Speaking as a South African, you know, the whole, the protection, the express protection of LGBT rights in the Constitution, and South Africa became the first country in the world to do that, was very much about a vision of a future society that was based on constitutional democracy, and the protection of minorities was seen as a litmus test for the success of constitutional democracy. Now there's a problem of violence in South Africa, but the difference is that the law is in place to at least address that problem and to address that issue.
I asked the question though because one of, I think, the most harrowing moments of the first part of that Stephen Fry documentary was the young, I think she was Russian woman, who described, you know, a slight young woman describing being out for a walk one night and a dozen people descended on her with baseball bats and knives, and only for one reason and one reason only.
Right.
Now, that's Russia, where I think organizations like yours would recognize that things are not good there for gay people. But do you see that in Canada? Does that kind of thing happen in Canada?
Well, I would like to say it depends on where in Canada you are. Canada is a very big country, you know, and I feel that if I could have been exposed to that homophobic, experience in the heart of the gay village, virtually, just outside of Church Street, but for the fact that it was the middle of the day, the guy was driving along, it would have probably been inconvenient for him to leave his van and come over and do something. What would have happened if it was night, he had friends, he'd had a couple beers, some rural part of Canada, I don't know.
Could have got out of hand.
It could have got out of hand. So I think we live in a fool's paradise if we think that Canada is that idyllic. I really don't know that we have done enough in Canada to address systemic homophobia, the fact that people just are still being misled by a lot of religious fundamentalism. We still have in Canada a very powerful evangelical movement that is very anti-gay. I mean, to the point where they're exporting their homophobia to other parts of the world. It's not being talked about, the fact that Canadians are actively exporting homophobia. We in Jamaica experience that, as I've said before, the reason we have a law still in Jamaica is because of the support of Canadian evangelicals to the anti-gay movement in Jamaica to ensure that that law remains on the books. So I wouldn't be so quick to say just because Canada has the law, or that, we don't have a tax against white, Jewish, gay men, that we've arrived. No, I really think there's much more work to be done.
Sarah, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, there's so much homophobia in Canada. Like, there's time I was in the subway with my girlfriend. So she leaves, she gets to her stop, and she's going out. She gives me a kiss, and all these people in the subway look at us like, are you guys crazy? Are you guys really normal? So yeah, I got scared because I was left in the subway. In the subway, there's lots of homophobia in the subway. There's a guy I work with, he's from Jamaica. He told me he had a very bad experience in the subway. This guy noticed that he was gay by the way he was dressed up. And the guy said something. There's a word they use in Jamaica. He said, "Party man" or something. We don't use that in Africa. And the guy moved on next to him. And when he was getting out of the train, because he was scared, he was already scared, he already felt like this guy was very homophobic, the guy kicked him on the back. And as the train the door was opening, he got out, but he tried to come back in to get to the guy to ask him why he's doing that, but he couldn't get back because the doors were closed. So that's here in the subway.
Having said that, I saw you shaking your head in the midst of Maurice's answer.
Well, look, there's certainly going to be an issue in Canada. We have hundreds of thousands of immigrants who come in, a lot of people from countries where the treatment of gays and lesbians is pretty horrible. So some of these attitudes come into the country and some of it is here, but overall Canada is a pretty good place. And so it's not that, nobody's claiming it's perfect, but it's pretty good. And I think the focus, of the gay community here should now be on helping our brothers and sisters internationally. They're the ones who need our help.
Maurice?
I think it's a false choice to say we have to do either. You can do both, which is why, for example...
We're not doing the latter. We're not helping our people internationally.
I don't think that's true either. I think the fact is, Andrea's here. She's with a group, End Hate Laws.
We're founded specifically to talk about this issue.
And
Maurice is a part of our group.
We're working, LGBTI Aware Caribbean is trying to garner support. And we've garnered support in Canada to do work in countries in the Caribbean principally, to do police training, LGBT sensitization training with police, media workers, etc. So there is that work happening. Maybe, if you give me your card, we can talk.
I'm not saying some of that work is not happening. But what I'm saying is not enough is happening to really get the gay community mobilized to fight the executions in Iran, to fight the death penalties in Saudi Arabia and other countries, to fight the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Conference, where you have 57 members who continually use the UN as a mechanism to fight homosexuality.
Does he have a point there, Andrew?
I just hear him focusing a lot on the Middle East, and that I'm not saying we shouldn't be putting attention on the Middle East.
I didn't say the Middle East. I said the OIC. That's 57 countries.
You mentioned Iran a number of times, and absolutely, Iran, their ideology toward homosexuality is appalling. But we can't just focus on Iran.
But I didn't say that.
I said we have to also within Canada. If you leave the bubble of Toronto, and you go into small town Ontario or Calgary or, you know, and any of these places outside of major cities and major metropolis, you're going to find homophobia, and you're going to sometimes find violent homophobia.
Can I push back just for the purposes of discussion here a little bit? 3 months ago, we had a provincial election in this province in which a 60-year-old openly gay lesbian grandmother became the elected premier of the province, and the issue of her sexual orientation never came up once. In private conversations, I'm sure, but in media reporting, in leaders' debates, in all candidates' meetings, never once.
And that's a mark of our progression. That
I was going to say, that's something, isn't it?
But that doesn't change the bullying that happens in schools, in small town Ontario, or even in big city Ontario. It doesn't change the attitudes, many of which come from evangelical Christian parents teaching this to their kids.
Graham wants in.
Well, I just want to talk about our work as Human Rights Watch, working internationally, and to raise some of the complicated questions that also come up. I mean, we're bringing out a report on Jamaica in October of this year. We're bringing out a report on Malaysia in 2 weeks' time. We work in various parts of the world. And always in close association with organizations that are based in country. So I think it's always a mistake to imagine doing the work in the abstract. It's always very important to build strong partnerships with local groups and local organizations. And often the situation is a little bit more complicated than it first appears, including in Iran, because often the homosexuality charges are brought to discredit people who are accused on political grounds or other grounds, and then the support from international organizations is actually completely contrary to the individual's interests there, because they're not gay often. The homosexuality charges are brought there to discredit them. Or it's non-consensual sex, because Iran doesn't draw a distinction in terms of the law. The problem with Iran is it's completely untransparent, so one never knows. And it does have a death penalty for homosexuality. But the situation is often much more complicated than it at first appears.
When you do these country reports, you mentioned Jamaica, Malaysia, what kind of information will people learn when they read those reports, when they come out?
Well, we always do have a researcher in country who interviews the victims and survivors of violence, takes personal testimonies. In Jamaica, we'll learn about the ongoing experience of violence and the lack of response, adequate response from state authorities. In Malaysia, we'll learn about how the existing Sharia law works against transgender women in particular, that the Sharia law against cross-dressing is used against transgender people. And so those are the kinds of issues that we highlight in our Human Rights Watch reports.
Maurice, is it fair to say, in your experience, that the more westernized the country is, the less of an issue all of this is going to be? The less westernized the country is, the more of an issue it's going to be?
You know, I wish it was as simple as that, because I've also found that the Western export of homophobia is also very aggressive right now. So I wish it was as simple as that.
You keep saying that, the Western export of homophobia.
Yes.
How does the West export homophobia?
Okay, very simple example. We've all heard of the situation in Uganda, the anti-sodomy law, which is currently going to be resubmitted to Parliament. That law was introduced in the Ugandan Parliament a few weeks or months after American Scott Lively went there and held a very aggressive anti-gay conference where he basically likened gay people to the Nazis, to pedophiles, to a whole mass of evil. And he was then picked up on by David Bahati, a member of parliament, who was also Western trained, very evangelical, very conservative, and got most of his exposure to homophobia from the West. He took it back to Uganda, and it was reinforced by Scott Lively, and then we had this horrible law. Now, it's important to remember that Uganda had a tradition of homosexuality. There never was a law that criminalized homosexuality until it was first brought by the British and then reinforced by the American evangelicals. So my concern with you know, this East-West divide is that India, which is particularly not non-Western, has a very liberal tradition towards Hijra, which is the third gender.
But they were saying in Stephen Fry's documentary that they had 250 years of British rule that they had to, and British laws about this that they had to overcome.
Right, because before the Britons came, before they were exposed to Western culture, they never viewed homosexuality as a crime or an abomination. They had to be taught this by the West.
So that's the Western import you're talking about.
That's the Western export and import of homophobia.
Export and import.
Yes.
Fred?
Well, look, you're right about Scott Lively and his evangelical groups who do export some hatred,
and Canadians
to
too.
Russia, to a variety of countries. But overall, the West is exporting gay pride and a whole variety of terrific messages around the world. I know. I lived in Singapore. I went all through Asia. The Singaporeans looked to the West, looked to the gay pride marches, looked to everything we're doing here. Though that export, which you see everywhere, far exceeds this horrible export from the evangelical community.
Well, I mean, Andrea, we did see in the documentary, Brazil, which you think of as being a muscularly heterosexual country, has the biggest pride march in the world now.
It also ends in a riot.
And they also have some of the most horrific attacks against trans people recorded every year. I mean, year on year, they have more deaths per capita in terms of trans people than anybody else in the Western Hemisphere. So we must not, for any stretch of the imagination, think that because the West is there, there's going to be an absence of hate towards gays. No.
And it's also really important to remember that back in the 80s, the Americans particularly were responsible for attaching a moralistic idea to HIV relief. And so George W. Bush famously made sure that in order for funds to be directed to Uganda specifically, was they had to teach HIV support and prevention through an abstinence lens. So they were.
That's not totally true.
Well, actually,
that's not true. No. The presidential program, which George Bush put through, started with $5 billion, eventually grew to a $48 billion fund.
You're talking PEPFAR?
Yes.
PEPFAR is supposed to be...
Mostly for retrovirus treatment. They treated over 5 million treatments in Africa, which is why when Hillary Clinton goes to Africa, people tell her about George Bush.
You want to follow up on that? I mean, that is known.
I find it very difficult to believe that we would be in the situation where we have now, where, like Maurice discussed, the flooding in of evangelical Christians pushing this anti-gay agenda, if it wasn't already attached to funding. The funding was already there, and they just accessed it.
Don't know the facts about his program.
Let me do Can I do a 180 with you here, Graham, a little bit? In the same way that your home and native land was thought to have taken a great step forward in the issue of race relations when Barack Obama became president. Do you think it will also take the election of an openly gay president of the United States for similar gains to be made in the U.S.?
I just need to make one slight correction, is that my home country is South Africa.
Well, that's right.
My country of residence.
Okay, fair enough, yes.
Is the US.
That's not exactly a Yankee accent, is it?
No.
Okay,
No.
I get it. But to the question, is that what it will take in the United States to get the kind of progress that Americans might be looking for?
I mean, in a sort of idealistic future, hopefully that wouldn't be an issue. I mean, in South Africa, there are openly lesbian, there's a lesbian in the cabinet, there's an openly gay man as an MP. It is an issue and it's noticed because it's unusual, but hopefully in a more a less discriminatory future, it wouldn't have such significance as it does now. Gotcha. I personally don't think that is the litmus test for the success of non-discrimination in America or anywhere.
Not the litmus test, but maybe a litmus test?
Well, you mentioned, the example here is that it was quite remarkable that there was no public discussion, and that's how it should be, right? It wasn't an issue. To a person's sexuality should not be a factor in determining their capability of doing a particular job.
Before the clock gets away from us here, Sheldon, I'm on the bottom of page 3. Can we play this second clip from Stephen Fry's documentary Out There? This is when he goes to Uganda, he meets with activists. as well as opponents of homosexuality, and they get into quite an argument. I think this is his argument with the Minister for Ethics and Integrity. Okay, roll tape, please.
I want to tell you point blank that there's no way you can impose your attitude to me.
I don't want to. I'm asking questions.
I am a typical Ugandan, and my role and mandate here is to empower Ugandans to uphold moral values and principles. And we don't discriminate. However, we say, please, please, it's already bad that you are in that status. Don't promote, don't recruit, don't encourage others to come into your very unfortunate status.
This is what's unique in Uganda, this extraordinary idea of yours of promotion. I was, all my life, I was subjected to indoctrination of how to be heterosexual. It never worked on me. It never, if you're born that
what
way,
I'm telling
you're
you
born
is,
gay,
why don't
or you're born straight,
no,
or just let people be.
The minister actually goes on later in the clip to say, you keep this up, I'm going to have you arrested right here and now, which was really quite extraordinary. What do you see there when you see that clip?
You know, I see a lot of misinformation. I won't use a stronger term, but the minister, as you know, is also an ex-Catholic priest. And I see this as a function of his indoctrination. Because if the minister was to be truthful, a typical Ugandan man sees male intimacy as being a part of the culture. It is a historical and anthropological part of their culture. But they were taught this hate. Similarly, in my own country, you know, Jamaicans are now becoming much more homophobic because of an indoctrination, an export, and you know, a kind of re-energizing of the anti-gay animus. Which
you think more homophobic today than they were in past decades?
Exactly, because what happened in the past was it was talked about, but nobody cared. But now we're seeing this, the losers in the culture war, as I like to call it, from North America, coming to Jamaica in droves, holding conferences, you know, holding mass demonstrations. We've never had the kind of mass protests against gays that we're now having in Jamaica. The last one was in June of this year.
World Pride.
And they're now, the same day World Pride took place in Toronto, we had a mass demonstration against gays in the capital city. And now they're taking it around the country. And it's whipping up a kind of, you know, animus where most people just didn't care.
Sarah, let me get you to follow up. Uganda and Kenya, obviously very close together in Africa, and this was an example we saw from Uganda. Has that spilled over into Kenya?
Yes, it has spilled over into Kenya because, like my home is 2 hours drive to Uganda, and the hate speech, it's everywhere.
The hate speech?
Yeah, it's everywhere in Kenya. Like when I came here, they look for me. They look for me because they see the hate speech happening in Uganda, and in Kenya, it keeps on escalating.
When you say they're looking for me, who's the they?
The people from my tribe, the police, the chief.
You get the sense that you're sort of in the crosshairs on this.
Yes.
What do you think will change? You know, we've seen, as we've talked about, significant changes, mostly in Western countries over the last many decades. Mm-hmm. What do you think it will take to get that kind of change in the country you're from, in Kenya?
Oh my God, I don't even dream about that now.
Really? Don't think it's possible?
No.
That breaks my heart.
I don't even dream about that. Even when you talk about gay marriage, that's like a dream come true.
I mean, I shared your similar pessimism, I have to say, because I thought, what would it take to achieve equality and liberation in Jamaica? And I thought, would it be a legal challenge, you know, getting rid of the laws? Would it be a token gay politician? You know, what would it take? And I realized that it all has to do with education. People are just misinformed about what gays are about. And that is why we founded LGBTI Aware Caribbean. Quite interestingly, we're taking a model that was used in Canada to train police in Canada on LGBTI sensitization and bringing it to the Caribbean. And we've seen remarkable transformation. We've seen police officers who come into the training hostile, you know, condemning gays and calling for a death.
Is this here or there?
No, in the Caribbean. We're taking it across the Caribbean. All of a sudden, come to the realization that they have gay kids. You know, they have gay family members, and they weren't perverted or dangerous. So why did they have this animus? And once we've started to help them to deconstruct that, we've seen marvelous changes. So I think the focus has to be on education. It can't be on marriage. I'm sorry. And marriage is not even a big issue in my country at all, for anybody.
So stop sweating about same-sex marriage. Go for other issues. Fred.
There's another very important point, is that the fight for gay rights has to be accompanied by a fight for human freedom. The freedom of association, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly. You could look at, for instance, Cuba. Cuba was a backwater of gay rights. They're making some progress because of Raul Castro's daughter. But in the absence of freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, all the basic freedoms, you can't do much, because you can't have a gay organization. In Singapore, it's illegal for gays to have an organization. So it makes it hard to organize and get the kind of systemic change that you need. So basic freedoms are very, very important.
But I have heard, let me get first Fred on this and then Andrea. I have heard by people who are in high school today that by the time they become adults, this is just not going to be an issue anymore. This is all going to go away because they don't have, I'm generalizing here, but they don't have those kinds of prejudices among their cohort. True or false?
Absolutely true. I mean, even in the States right now, if you look at the attitudes of young Republicans towards same-sex marriage, most young Republicans support same-sex marriage by a huge margin. This is not an issue. It's going away, which is why I think the gay community can now focus on international issues.
Andrea, does this issue go away because young people just aren't as fixated on all of this as older generations?
I think young people are a key to this fight. I think they're absolutely a key, but I don't think not every young person is on the same page. Not every young person feels this way. I mean, look at the fight we had a couple of years ago over gay-straight alliances in Ontario. I mean, there were a lot of youth, a lot of young people who attached themselves to the anti-side, and they, you know, well, enough that they were noticeable at the rallies at Queen's Park, and and enough that they were being propped up by the Charles McVities and it shocked me, it surprised me that there wasn't as many allies that were willing to fight for their queer classmates.
As you look at the situation in the United States, is this a generational thing that just will go away because young people are just not as interested in this issue as their older parents and grandparents?
That certainly seems to be the case in the United States. I was very skeptical about how the incremental approach to marriage equality would work in the United States, but it seems to be that state by state that same-sex marriage is recognized, and it does seem that there's a trend towards that. But I don't think from that you can draw conclusions that it would be the same in all parts of the world.
Sure. So. And you're probably, Sarah, going to tell us that. Well, I shouldn't presume to know. Why don't you tell us? In the schools, well, in the schools of Kenya, are young people taught not to be bigoted against gay people?
No, they're not taught that. They don't. They're not taught that. But what I know is that I'm a mother, and I know my children, they never discriminate against gay people. Yeah.
But they have you as an example, so they know not to. Yes,
but the others, no. They don't know anything. They lack information about gay people. To them, being gay is all about choosing to be. It's sexuality. It's all sex. Yeah. It's not wanting to be a normal human being. You're abnormal. That's why you're gay.
How old are your children?
My children are 11.
11 years old?
Yeah.
Twins? No, triplets. You've got triplets. Yes. That's right.
Yeah.
Where do they live?
They live in Kenya.
They do?
Yes.
So you don't see them?
No, I don't.
You want to get them over here?
Yes, I do.
How's that going?
I have to take one step at a time.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's just finish up here. What do we got? A couple minutes left here? 2 minutes left. Okay.
If I may
Please,
respond
yes.
to what she said. I mean, I am also a father, and I have the same challenges. I have a son who I would love to exposed to more liberal thinking.
Where is he, Maurice?
He's not living with me. He's living with his mother in the Caribbean. But the difficulty is that in the Caribbean, it is almost anathema to speak about LGBT rights in a positive way. So unlike what's happening in Canada and in the United States, there's not going to be that generation that will catch up with liberal thinking. We have to start a top-down approach, sadly, with the educators, with the police, with the stakeholders, that they will eventually start thinking it's okay, because we're going in the opposite direction. We tried to, in Jamaica, introduce a very liberal curriculum that spoke about the fact of homosexuality, not even endorsing it, but just the fact of it. And it was pulled with great fanfare from the school curriculum. And, you know, it set the movement back. So whereas you're making all these advances in the North in terms of a generation of children who will be inclusive and tolerant, we are having the direct opposite happening in my country, in Jamaica.
Let me give you the last 30 seconds on this.
And I think, you know, as far as Canadians, the best thing that we can do is to really push our MPs, call your MP and push this issue. Ask them to take a stand. Ask them to speak out. And certainly the one major thing that we can do here in Canada to make it easier is make it easier for refugees and newcomers to come here and escape asylum. There's absolutely no reason in the world Canada should be closing the door for in the face of people being persecuted, especially for their sexual orientation or gender identity.
We take gay refugees.
It's difficult.
We've taken over 200 gay refugees from Iran.
Excuse me, as we've just heard from Sarah, that it is very difficult.
Taken in a fair number of gay refugees.
Fred, it's very, very difficult. Like when you say you need to help your gay brothers and sisters who are out there, it's very difficult.
Absolutely.
I have friends back home who are gay, and
225 gay Iranians.
If you're not white and male, it's very difficult.
No, it's not entirely true.
I hate to do this because we're just really cooking with gas here, but I got to bring the gavel down. That's our time. Thanks, everybody, for coming over to our studios in Leaside tonight and having this conversation with us. We're really grateful. Thank you. Especially you came all the way in from New York, so that's really nice of you to do that. Thank you. And from Ottawa.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.